What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I would like to welcome you all to another edition of Wayne's Perspective, where we operate in discipline, decency, integrity, and respect. And I'm coming through with another video just for you. All right, y'all. So today's video is going to be a very interesting one. I haven't talked about gun control that much on my channel. I may have made a few comments about it, but I never did an actual full video discussing it. And that's what we're going to get on today, but it's going to be by way of the Supreme Court's decision to ban bump stocks, or should I say their decision to block a ban on bump stocks. And the video is going to come courtesy of a video on the TYT Investigates channel. Now, excuse me, speaking of TYT, usually when I see that, it makes me think of the Young Turks. Now, I believe this is an extension of their channel. And just to say this to begin, I used to be a fan of the Young Turks back in the day. Pretty much this was during the Trump era. I used to listen to their videos a lot, but in a not so ironic twist, I unfollowed them as the 2020 election was starting to get underway. So I don't have any shade against them or any issues against them per se. I'm just no longer a fan of the channel. However, this TYT Investigates channel, especially if it's coming from a Democratic point of view, I'll grant you that, it is, more liberal leaning. I'll say that, but the videos that they get, or should I say the videos that I uploaded on that channel, they're pretty good. And most of them, if not all, but then again, I think all of them usually come from the legislators themselves. And it's not just from the House of Representatives and the Senate. It also comes from various state houses across the country, So in this regard, I do like the content. I'm just not going to look at, anything that Cenk and Anna does. I'm pretty much done with that wing of the channel, if you will. So the only other thing that I want to mention before I get into this video is I understand what the Second Amendment is. I respect what the Second Amendment is. Now, I don't own any firearms. I'm not a licensed gun owner or anything, and I'm not sure if that's going to change in the future or not, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. So I do understand the right to bear arms. I do understand protecting yourselves, protecting your family. I do understand that, especially from an American point of view or as a human. I respect that. You do want to support yourself. You do want to protect yourself. You do want to protect your family from any harm. And by any means, if somebody enters into your property, public or otherwise, that should not be there, you are well within your rights to defend yourself and your family from, any law breaking, intrusion, breaking and entering, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm all for that. I got no issues with that. However, the main issue that I have is when it comes to gun control. Now, I'm all for strict gun control measures. And my point is that people who've been convicted of crimes before, especially DV situations, anything to that effect, they do not need to have access to weapons. It's that simple. If you've been in any situation like that or anything that's worse, you do not need to have access to a weapon. And then I just have to ask, what's more important? You being able to access a weapon when you clearly should not have one, or my right to life, if you will. Your right to own a firearm or a weapon of any kind does not supersede my desire to live. It just doesn't. And that's the main issue that I had, and still have to this day. When it comes to that, no, nobody is saying that people are trying to take anybody's guns away, but you should not have guns if you. Okay, let me back up and do that again. Certain people should not be entitled to or have the privilege to own a firearm. Another case that I want to make is that if you have some type of mental challenges or mental issues, or you need to see a psychiatrist or anything like that, if you're mentally ill, you do not need to be in possession of a firearm. Let me say it again. Mental issues of any kind, you do not need to own any type of weapon that's going to harm yourself and harm others. You just don't need to be in possession of anything like that. Bottom line. So overall, I am in support of measures put in place to make sure that people like that do not obtain firearms. It should not be easy to get cigarettes and things like that, or should I say, it should not be easy to get a gun, but it's hard to get cigarettes. It's hard to get beer. You get what I'm saying? And I've always been on the side of that. So if it comes to any type of efforts that'll make it harder and more strict for certain people to get certain kind of weapons, I'm all for that. And last but not least, all of this I'm going to touch on in this video. And Senator Chris Murphy, he gives a masterclass on this, and I'm going to highlight his video and I'm going to give my thoughts. But another thing that I want to mention is that, when it comes to gun control and things like that, like I said, it's not that people want to take people guns away, but answer me this. Do you think that somebody who's mentally ill deserves to have a gun or a firearm or anything like that? And speaking of guns and firearms, and this is going to be highlighted in the video, civilians do not need to be in possession of high-powered weaponry, weapons that are designed for war in the battlefield. No, civilians do not need to have access to weapons like that. And it just still boggles the mind why people are so passionate about owning things like that, that, again, you should not be in possession like that. I should not be in possession of a weapon like that. It's not for civilians. It's a reason why they're strictly for the military and things like that. Hell, even law enforcement, why does the average everyday citizen need to have a weapon of war in their hands? Why? It makes no sense to me. So I just wanted to preface all of that. I wanted to say all of that rather before we get into this video. And speaking of the video, let's go ahead and get into this now. So credit goes to the TYT Investigates channel, and shout out to Chris Murphy for this. He gives an excellent masterclass on this. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get right into this.
Welcome to another day in the Democrats' summer of show votes. The majority leader has decided to bring up a bill called the Bump Act. He claims this bill will ban bump stocks. But just like his previously misnamed bills, if you actually read the bill, that's not what it does at all. The Bump Act targets common firearm accessories, not just bump stocks. So this bill may be called the Bump Act, but it's not really about bump stocks. This bill is about banning as many firearm accessories as possible, giving ATF broad authority to ban most semi-automatic firearms. It's an unconstitutional attack on law-abiding gun owners.
Now, I'm not going to comment fully on that senator right there, but let's just say that everything he said was absolutely false. Let's move on.
In the United States Senate and the House of Representatives are doing on a regular basis is facilitating the mass slaughter of Americans, handing to individuals whose brains are breaking the tools of mass slaughter, refusing to do the easy, popular, common sense things to just make it a little bit harder for 58 people to be gunned down, 500 people to be injured in a 10-minute period of time. I take this personally because I have lived through an experience of mass slaughter, as has the presiding officer. I did not lose a loved one, but I've come to know those families from Sandy Hook like they are family. And I know there is never, ever getting over losing a loved one. Frankly, whether it be to a gun death by suicide or by mass slaughter. But it makes it harder to deal with the loss of a loved one in a mass killing when you know the people that you elect to positions of high office had the power to prevent the slaughter, or at least prevent it from being as bad as it was, and they chose to do nothing. Mr. President, we don't have to fight over everything here. It's okay if occasionally we find consensus around common sense things that we could do together to keep our country safe. I kind of thought we had consensus on at least the idea that civilians shouldn't be able to get their hands on machine guns.
I'm just looking at the description here, and even the description says Murphy delivers a masterclass and destroys the Republican Party for being against common sense gun laws. Now, this is my first time seeing that, so it's interesting that that description says that, and I also preface my video by saying that he gives a masterclass, because he really does. You know, let's keep it going.
I understand there's differences between Republicans and Democrats on AR-15s, that maybe not all of my Republican colleagues think that everybody should go through a background check before they buy a gun. But I thought we were all in agreement that fully automatic weapons were too dangerous to be in the hands of civilians, that these are unquestionably weapons of war. They are designed for mass slaughter, and you just do not need a weapon that allows you to fire hundreds of rounds per minute in order to hunt, in order to protect your home, in order to shoot for sport.
And there are weapons for that. And a bump stock and anything like it, you do not need weapons like that to participate in things that he just mentioned. You just do not need it.
But apparently, Mr. President, we do not have consensus on the question of whether Americans should have access to machine gun technology. Because earlier today, Senator Heinrich, a gun owner, somebody that knows a lot about weapons, came to the floor to ask for consent that we make sure that civilians can't get their hands on a device called a bump stock that allows you to convert a semi-automatic weapon into a machine gun. That's effectively what a bump stock does. It allows you to change a semi-automatic weapon, in which you have to pull the trigger in order to fire each round, into an automatic weapon in which one physical pull of the finger allows you to fire multiple rounds. It effectively gives you access to an automatic weapon. I thought that we all agreed that automatic weapons, machine guns, should be in the hands of the military. I especially thought we all agreed on that after what happened in Las Vegas.
Oh man, let me talk to y'all about that. Now, I know y'all remember that mass shooting that took place in Las Vegas, and he's going to go into it again. Man, I remember when I first heard about that and how angry I was. And look, let me be clear. It's not because the man who perpetrated that act was white. You know, if that man was black, I would have been the same way. If that man was Muslim, I would have felt the same way. If he was Puerto Rican, it doesn't matter. You know, the race of the person doesn't matter. Now, I know y'all thinking, why did I bring that up? Well, okay. You know, kind of a random thing to bring up, but I digress. But continuing on, when I first heard about that and I listened to the news clips the next day, I was just so angry, mainly because how senseless it was. And not only that, but my anger continued because, of course, when something like that happens in our country, the next best, no, not the next best thing, but the next thing that happens is people look to their lawmakers. Okay, do something, you know, asking, what are you going to do about it? And it's always the two immediate things, usually that's coming from the Republicans, not the Democrats. Two things. Number one, thoughts and prayers. Number two, it's too early to talk about it. It's the same thing every time out, each time out. You know, the same thing. One side wants to do nothing and the other side wants to do something. And that's important here. But like I said, that mass shooting at Las Vegas, in Las Vegas, I mean, I was incredibly upset because 58 people needlessly lost their lives, you know, based on a, you know, guess you could say a terrorist in this case. You know, that's exactly what happened. And then, of course, what also upsets me is when the gunmen take their own lives. See, you're big and bad with that weapon in your hand, but then when the pressure gets tight and law enforcement is rightly about to come on your ass, then you want to take yourself out. That really grinds my gears, y'all. It really does. And this incident in Las Vegas back in 2017, it did that. Let's keep it moving.
On October 1st, 2017, a gunman opened fire on a concert from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. There were 500
Crazy.
yards between that gunman on the 32nd floor and those innocent concert goers. That gunman fired about 1,100 rounds.
Did y'all hear that? 1,100 rounds. That is insane.
Killing 58 people, 58 people, and wounding 500. When we think about the Las Vegas tragedy, we focus on that number, 58 people. That's a stunning number of people to die in an instant. We don't talk about the 500 people who were injured, many of them with injuries that changed their lives forever. Everyone,
Right.
whether they were injured or
Right.
not, dealing with trauma that impacted their lives forever. 1,100 rounds fired from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. You know how long it took him to get off 1,100 rounds? 11 minutes. 11 minutes. That gunman was able to fire around 90 shots every 10 seconds. Why? Because he had
Unbelievable.
taken a bump stock and converted a semi-automatic weapon, turning it effectively into an automatic weapon. Even Donald Trump, the biggest backer of the NRA and the gun lobby that has ever been in the White House, knew that something had to change. He put forward a regulation to ban bump stocks, and most of my Republican colleagues celebrated.
Yep, of course they celebrated. But look, anytime Trump comes up, and I talk about him on my channel, I have a lot to say about this guy. So credit what credit is due here, because if Donald Trump thinks it's insane, it's insane. So I would give him credit with what he attempted to do in 2017. But then again, any president from any party would have done the same thing. So I would give him credit with one to ban bump stocks. You get credit from me, all right? You know, you don't get credit for much from me, but I give him credit on that. No question about that.
That change. I don't remember many of them opposing it.
They did.
But this month, the Supreme Court, packed with pro-gun lobby justices, most of which selected by Donald Trump, ruled that that regulation was unconstitutional. I think they got it wrong.
And let's keep it clear. The conservative-leaning justices in the Supreme Court got it wrong. The liberal side didn't. They got it wrong because this was not unconstitutional. You know, now y'all can read up a little bit more on that. I'm not going to talk more about that. But then again, if I find an article, I may link it in the description box talking about the Supreme Court's decision there. But yeah, the 6 conservatives on the court bench got it wrong. 100%.
I think they absolutely got it wrong. I think if you look at the plain reading of the statute, bump stocks are illegal. And the regulation proffered by the Trump administration should have been ruled as constitutional. But Trump's appointees thought otherwise. They bought the argument of the gun lobby, and they ruled that bump stocks could once again be sold commercially in this country. And so we thought that it'd be an easy case to make to our colleagues that, having seen the regulation proffered by the Trump administration be ruled unconstitutional, having been offered by the Supreme Court the chance to fix that statutorily, that we could get to that business this week. But we are not, because Republicans objected to our efforts to try to pass into law a ban on bump stocks.
And you see that? See, I guess the R in Republican stand for rejection, because why would you reject that? You know, help us make sense of that. Why would you reject that? You see, like I said earlier, one side clearly has been and still wants to do something, and the other side just wants to reject, obstruct, and do nothing at all. But yet and still, we should keep rewarding them with these seats of power to just sit there and do nothing. Give me a break.
To try to take away from psychopaths and madmen the technology that allows them to turn an automatic weapon on crowds of concert goers and
Right.
get off 1,000 plus rounds in a 10-minute period of time. No law that we pass will end gun homicides in this country. No law that we pass will completely eliminate mass shootings.
Okay, now I get the point that he's making, but I think I disagree with that slightly, because there was a shooting. I can't recall which country off the top of my head, and I should have, considering how many times I've seen documentaries on this. But there was a shooting, I want to say it was in 1996. I believe it was in Great Britain or the UK or something like that. And it was at a school, and a good number of children were unalived. And of course, that was a case where the shooter, when the pressure got tight, he took his own life. But what else is new? But what happened after the fact was the legislation there, the legislative body, they took action. And when they took action, the number of gun homicides decreased dramatically. And one person who was talking about that on the episode that I was looking at, with a documentary rather, said that they took steps to end gun violence. And that's something that we as in America, we don't do. You know, so if we took similar steps like that, granted, is it going to further eradicate or eliminate gun violence 100%? Most likely not. But you can take the necessary steps to dramatically bring that number down. You know, I mean, that makes sense to me, you know. So I just wanted to make that point clear. Let's continue on with Mr. Murphy.
But there simply are technologies like the bump stock that turn a mass shooting in which 5 or 10 people might have died into a 58-person slaughter.
And let's be clear, either number is unacceptable. One person dying is one person too many. But then when you get into the double digits, and unfortunately, in some cases, hopefully we'll never see it, but the triple digits, that's insane too.
It is just true that when you have a weapon like an AR-15, or you have a converted semi-automatic weapon with a bump stock, that the slaughter is worse, that more people die. Why on earth would we choose to hand to these killers weapons that are designed for one purpose and one purpose only: mass slaughter? You do.
Right. Exactly. That's the question. That's the question right there, because people like that do not deserve to have access to weapons like this, or weapons of any kind, if you ask me. But weapons like this, no, they do not need or deserve or should have the access or the benefits to obtain such weapons. Plain and simple.
Do not need a bump stock
Right.
in order to protect your home. You
Right.
do not need a machine gun in order to hunt for sport.
Right.
The only
There's
reason
weapons
you
for
need
that.
a bump stock is to engage in mass murder. Now, Republicans complain that this was a political stunt.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Why? Why would you classify this as a political stunt? Because one side wants to do something about it and y'all don't? There was nothing stunt-ish about this, you know, nothing.
What about everything that Joe Biden has said and done? What about the efforts that Senate Democrats have undertaken would suggest that we aren't sincere in our desire to prevent unnecessary gun deaths. We have over and over again acted in good faith to try to find bipartisan compromise around changing the gun laws of this nation. Joe Biden has shown absolute sincerity in his desire to try to keep more people alive. This is not a gotcha unanimous consent request. This is a real attempt to.
And miss me with that gotcha nonsense. Why do they always have this notion that somebody is out to get them? This whole gotcha notion. I mean, seriously, get out of here with that.
Effectuate
nonsense.
What we thought was a consensus that people shouldn't have access to machine gun technology in this country.
Right.
Senate Republicans could have agreed to work with us. They could make an offer today to expedite consideration of this bill next week. And so the only political decision that is being made here is by Republicans who are opposing a bill that is undoubtedly supported by the mass majority of Americans.
That's true.
So if this wasn't the way that Republicans wanted to do this, then I'm open to other offers. Because we have passed bipartisan legislation to save lives. There are Republicans who have joined us, most recently on the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
Very
what
few
we
of them.
know is that when we do come together and pass laws that make it harder for dangerous people to get their hands on dangerous weapons, we save lives. Urban gun deaths are down by 20% in this country. From 2022 to 2023, we saw the sharpest decline in gun murders in the history of this country. In 2024, mass shootings are down around 30% compared to the same time period in 2023. We are seeing a precipitous decline in gun violence in this country, whether it be urban homicides or mass shootings. And I'm not suggesting that the entire reason for that is the 2022 Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, but you better believe that's a big part of the reason. You better believe that when we pass laws that make it harder for dangerous people to get their hands on dangerous weapons, that we save lives.
Right.
And what matters in this country more than protecting the physical safety of your loved ones? What matters more? Nothing. Think about it. You would give anything to protect your son or daughter from physical harm. You would trade away your career, your savings. You might even give up your own life. And we have an easy opportunity. We had an easy opportunity. Republicans had an easy opportunity earlier today to just make it a little bit harder for this small subset of individuals in this country whose brains have collapsed and believe that the only way to deal with their demons is to turn a gun on others. We had a chance to make it less likely that that subset of individuals would be able to kill 58 people, like what happened in Las Vegas. And we couldn't even come to that consensus.
Right.
We're open for business. If this wasn't the way today, show us the way. Tell us how we can answer Republican concerns so that we can get these weapons of war, these facilitators of mass murder, these bump stocks off the streets.
All right. So with all that being said, major shout out to Senator Murphy for that. That was a masterclass. He said a lot of great things that I agree with when it comes to this issue. And I don't think I have any more to add to that in addition to what he said, in addition to what I already said, but I'm going to end with this before I do close the video. Anyone who has been in DV situations, anyone who has been convicted of violent crimes, definitely those who suffer from any kind of mental illness, and those who have been convicted of raping others, do not, I repeat, do not need to have access to any kind of weapon, much less a bump stock. Let me repeat that one more again for my old school people, one more again. Anyone who has been in DV situations, anyone who has been convicted of violent crimes, anyone who suffers from any kind of mental illness, and anyone who has been convicted of rape, do not, I repeat, do not need to have access to bump stocks or any other high-powered weaponry. Plain and simple. And I added a few words there for maximum effect. You don't need weapons like that in the hands of those people. No, no, never. And we should never accept such a thing. Never. So, with all that being said, y'all, if you like what you heard and you're ready to become part of Team Discipline, go ahead and hit that like button and let me know your thoughts on the issue. Do you think that bump stocks and other related weaponry is necessary or not? It's that simple. Let me know in the comments. And last but not least, hit that subscribe button along with the bell so you're notified when I drop new videos. And until next time, my people, take care of yourselves, be safe, and remember, the power of the mind